Today, UOG Professor Dr. Ron McNinch, our friend and political analyst, spoke to the Rotary Club of Tumon Bay, during which time he presented the 5 critical tasks ahead for Guam leaders in the next 4 years. The good doctor is here right now, so Ron, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks since we've had time to kind of like let the election hubbub kind of die down, and now, of course, welcome in the new generation of leadership. So let's go again right to the meat and potatoes of your presentation today. 5 big points. Number 1, court and lawyers as default leaders. Now, you mentioned in your speech, lead does not necessarily mean plead. So exactly what does that mean?
Sure. Basically, I hope that in the future our elected leaders will really try to resolve their political differences, not through the courts or not through legal types of means, but basically work on resolving the issues outside of the courts. Because right now, the normal pattern of behavior is for leaders to have a conflict. Quite often that conflict is in either bad policy or a bad set of laws or even bad management. And then instead of resolving it and making things work better, they go to the courts, which is very formal. The courts always do a good job, but it's a very formal, long, drawn-out, and expensive process. And we should relook that approach and strategy and look at how we can get the legislature and the executive branch to look at resolving issues outside of the courts.
And how did the membership take that? Because I know some people would be in favor of adjudication, and some people would be in favor of, like an impartial judge saying, according to statute, this is how things have to go, and if left to your own devices and everything, the whole thing will get way out of control. Mayors may wind up punching each other, senators may throw chili dogs at each other, go back to that thing.
Sure. Well, sometimes courts are really needed for certain types of political disputes, but I'm not all in favor of having like a judge. Well, first go to mediation, mediate it, discuss it as much as possible, because quite often these are communications breakdowns or sometimes there are political transition issues that play. But the other thing is maybe we just need a Judge Wapner type of character who serves as the political referee between the legislature and governor, between these politically kind of coordinated disputes, and basically tell our elected leaders, here's the right call, without having to go through the formal process of a court. Because really the public gets cut out of the court discussions because really courts speak in legal language and rather than in the plain language of the normal public, so the public can understand what's really went on.
And of course that just ties up the courts and very costly, and as you said, it's a long drawn out process, and that maybe ties up the judges from other matters over which they can look over. Okay, the second point in your presentation today, improving local government. What have you got?
Sure. Basically, Guam has all of the things necessary just to write a simple constitution. The U.S. Virgin Islands just had their constitutional process this past year. Having a constitution would allow an immense amount of local autonomy for Guam to govern itself internally and fully. This is the inside of the riddle for improving Guam. The Organic Act, I think all that needs to be done is a constitutional convention needs to be called using the Organic Act as the foundation. Don't change anything in it. Put a simple amendment clause on it, then submit it to the President and Congress for approval. That's a ready-mix constitution. Once a constitution's passed and approved by the President and the Congress, then through the amendment process you can kind of tweak it and put in all the other things that would normally take a long time in a constitutional process. That's one thing for improving the local government, giving our local government leaders the tools to fully manage and basically deal with issues internally within the government under full control without having to run to the U.S. Congress for those items, an internal governance initiative. The second thing that really needs to be done for many of our improving local government is we really need to take care on some of the laws that we write, because a lot of the litigation we mentioned earlier is a result of laws that are kind of contorted and they don't fit together very well. And we need to be really careful about making sure that the new policies that come out fit in a good sort of format. I call that the statute maze or the statute tangle. We need to untangle it a little bit.
Oh, okay, so the third point in your presentation was to optimize federal policy.
Right. Basically, in optimizing federal policy, Uncle Sam is not a real person, and Uncle Sam is not our uncle. The federal government really is like a dysfunctional family. And I don't mean to sound negative when I say this, but there are characters in the federal government that range from Santa Claus down to the evil stepmothers. Okay, you have all kinds of characters, and the federal government doesn't necessarily cooperate. Just like a dysfunctional family doesn't cooperate with itself very much, or as often as we might think it does. And one of the things we need to do is to fix that vis-a-vis our relationship with the federal government. We need a consistent, normal, solid policy, because right now we're on the roller coaster of these battling factions within the federal policy process that really puts us on ups and downs. And the classic example is the port. They want us to build up the port, we apply for the port funds get turned down, then suddenly they have to come up and find port funds from somewhere. That kind of thing shouldn't really happen. We should have a consistent, solid, steady relationship without this sort of back and forth.
Okay, well, I must say it's impressive, because it's not often we have guests here on Extra that take such direct pot shots at the federal government, and I'm pretty sure the CIA and NSA are watching at this point. So we'll see how that plays out. All right.
Well, yeah, sure.
Okay, well, moving on, that transitions nicely into your fourth point in your presentation, developing Guam-specific policies.
Sure.
What's that?
Guam-specific policy, really, we need to look at how we can be different. We're not a state. We don't have to play by the state rules per se. We can be different, and we can dare to be different. And one of the things that we always constantly try to do is to make Guam fit just like a state does. And what we have to do is argue that we're different. Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution says that Congress makes the rules for territories. We're a territory. One of the things that we should do to optimize our relationship is, and this relates back to the previous point, is we need a voice in the U.S. Senate. And there's a classic method called the Tennessee Plan to put us a voice in the U.S. Senate and in the Congress. We already have a voice in the House of Representatives. Madeline Berdallo, Congresswoman Berdallo, does a wonderful job there. Half of the conversation happens in the Senate. We have no voice there. The way to do it is simply popularly elect 1 or 2 senators to go and serve and represent Guam's interests in the U.S. Senate, and be really, that's called the Tennessee Plan. I would use a hybrid of that plan, meaning that we're not looking to change our political status, but we're missing out on half of the conversation. There's no one other than pointy-headed pencil pushers in Washington, D.C. advising the U.S. Senate on what Guam's interests are. We need a Guam representative to do that, a Guam delegate to the U.S. Senate to do that, or 2 delegates even.
Okay, and then unfortunately we only got about 30 seconds left, so we end this on what because of its literary qualities, I find this really, really interesting, overcoming the ghosts of policies past.
Sure. We have a lot of baggage from previous legislation and previous statutes. We need to overcome them, stop binding ourselves. The government has basically tied itself into knots. We need to go through and be mindful of that and come up with creative solutions, with creative ideas. And I think that we're going to have a great 2 years. More can be done in these next 2 years than have been done in the last 50 years if we take these opportunities.
Okay, well, Dr. Ron,